The alarm on my wrist console buzzed twice, which meant a service request, not an emergency. I wiped grease off my hands and walked toward the docking ring, where a cargo hauler had reported a coolant leak. Just another Tuesday on Station Varen, a trade hub the size of a small city, floating in a system that didn't belong to my species. Humans had only been allowed to work here for 2 years. We were not liked. We were tolerated, the way you tolerate a leaky faucet you haven't gotten around to fixing. I had a name badge that said Technician Human, as if my species was the important detail and not my job title. Most of the other workers on the station were Threnai, tall silver-skinned beings with an extra joint in their arms, and a deep, ancient pride in their engineering heritage. They built starships before my ancestors figured out bronze. They never let anyone forget it. I turned a corner near the docking bay and nearly walked into her. Commander Yisel Thren was the kind of alien you noticed even in a crowd of her own people. Silver skin polished to a shine, deep violet eyes, a uniform pressed so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. She commanded the station's engineering division, and she had made it clear, more than once, that she considered human workers a downgrade to the workforce, a necessary inconvenience, brought in because the labor contracts demanded diversity hires from allied worlds. She looked at my tool belt, my grease-stained sleeves, and smiled the way people smile when they're about to say something cruel and enjoy it. "Still fixing pipes, human?" she said, loud enough for the 4 Threnai engineers behind her to hear. "I keep waiting for you to do something impressive, but I suppose crawling through machinery is the most complicated task your species can manage." A couple of the engineers laughed. Not cruel laughter exactly. The kind of laughter that comes from people who've never had to question their place in the world. "You're nothing here, human," she said, tilting her head, clearly pleased with herself. "This station runs on Threnai engineering, Threnai mines. You're just furniture that happens to move." I didn't say anything. There wasn't a good response that wouldn't get me fired, and honestly, I had a coolant leak waiting for me. So I just nodded, stepped around her, and kept walking. Behind me, I heard her say something to her officers in Threnai dialect, and they laughed again. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things over those 2 years. You get good at swallowing insults when the alternative is losing the only job that lets you support a family 100 light years away. The coolant leak turned out to be minor, a cracked seal I patched in 20 minutes. I was heading back toward the maintenance bay thinking about lunch, when the lights in the corridor flickered. Once, then again. Then the whole ceiling let out a low groan, the kind of sound a structure makes right before it stops behaving like a structure. I froze, the way you do when your body understands danger before your brain catches up. Then the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red, and the station's announcement system crackled to life. "Attention! Hull breach detected in Sector 9. Structural integrity failing. All personnel evacuate to designated shelters." Sector 9. That was the engineering wing. That was where Commander Thren had just walked with her officers. I could have gone the other way. Nobody would have blamed me. I wasn't assigned to Sector 9, and evacuation protocol said to head to the nearest shelter, not toward a collapsing hull. But my toolkit was already on my back, and my legs were already moving toward the sound of alarms, instead of away from them, because that's just what you do when something's breaking, and you know how to fix things. The corridor leading into Sector 9 was already venting atmosphere in short bursts, the kind of hiss that means a containment field is losing its grip on a breach. I grabbed an emergency pressure suit from a wall locker, sealed it fast, and pushed through a set of doors that were trying very hard to close on their own. Inside, it was chaos. A support strut had failed near the main coolant relay, and the whole section had buckled, twisting metal in a way that looked like a giant hand had crumpled it. Threnai engineers were scrambling, shouting instructions in their dialect, running diagnostic scanners over systems that clearly weren't going to respond to diagnostics. Their advanced technology, all their inherited brilliance, and not one of them seemed to know what to do about a very simple, very old problem, a mechanical seal failure combined with a coolant surge. I found Commander Thren near the center of it, her polished uniform now streaked with dust, shouting orders that her officers were following without much effect. She looked panicked in a way I had never seen from her, not the calm authority from an hour ago, real fear. "The auxiliary system won't respond," one of her engineers shouted. "If the coolant reaches the reactor interface, we lose the whole sector. I looked past them at the twisted strut, at the coolant line spraying vapor into the air, and I understood the problem in about 4 seconds. It wasn't complicated. It was almost embarrassingly simple, the kind of failure that happens on old freighters back home all the time. The pressure release valve had jammed shut when the strut buckled, which meant coolant had nowhere to go, except toward the reactor interface, exactly like the engineer said. There was a manual override. There was always a manual override, on every system I had ever worked on, because engineers who build things for a living know that automated systems fail. But the Threnai scanners were built for diagnostics, not for manual overrides. Their whole culture trusted the machine to fix the machine. Nobody was trained to just open a panel and turn a valve by hand. I was. "Move," I said, pushing past 2 engineers who were still staring at their scanners, like the readings might change if they looked hard enough. Commander Thren turned, saw me, and for a moment her expression did something complicated. Surprise, maybe insult, maybe both. "This is not your station, human. Step back before." "There's a manual valve behind that access panel," I said, already crouching next to the twisted strut, already pulling tools from my belt. "The auto release jammed. If I don't open it by hand in the next minute, that pressure's going straight into your reactor interface." She stared at me. I didn't wait for permission. I popped the panel, found the valve exactly where I expected it, and threw my weight against the release lever. It didn't move. Of course it didn't. Buckled metal doesn't leave things sitting nice and loose. "I need something to extend this lever," I said, not really to anyone in particular. "A pipe, a bar, anything with length." For a second, nobody moved. Then Commander Thren, without a word, unclipped a metal support rod from a nearby equipment rack and shoved it into my hands. Her own hands were shaking slightly, but she didn't hesitate. I slid the rod over the lever, braced my boots against the deck plating, and pulled with everything I had. The valve groaned, resisted, and then gave way all at once, spinning open with a hiss of released pressure. The vapor spraying into the compartment thinned, then stopped. Somewhere behind the wall, I heard the coolant redirect through an emergency vent, instead of toward the reactor. The room went quiet, except for the sound of everyone breathing. "Sector 9, report," the station system called over the comm. One of the engineers, still catching his breath, answered with numbers I didn't fully understand. Something about pressure readings stabilizing and reactor interface remaining uncompromised. Whatever it meant, the tension in the room broke like a held breath finally released. Commander Thren was still standing there, the metal rod's absence obvious in her empty hands, staring at the valve I had just closed. Her uniform was covered in dust. Her perfect composure from an hour earlier was completely gone. "How did you know that?" she said quietly. Not mocking this time, so genuinely asking. "Every mechanical system has a manual backup," I said, standing up and brushing dust off my knees. "Doesn't matter how advanced the automated version is. Something built it, so something can override it by hand. It's not exactly a secret, just not something people usually need to know." "We didn't know," she said. "None of my engineers knew that valve existed." "You've probably never needed to," I said. "Your systems don't fail often. When mine do, back home, we don't always have the luxury of calling for a repair crew. You learn to fix things with your hands, because sometimes, your hands are all you've got." She looked at the twisted strut, at the vapor still drifting from the emergency vent, and then back at me. Something in her face had changed, like a piece of furniture had been moved, in a room she thought she knew perfectly. "You saved this section," she said. "You saved my engineers. You saved me." "I did my job," I said, and I meant it plainly, without any weight behind it. I wasn't trying to make a point, I was just telling the truth. Around us, the other Threnai engineers had gone quiet, watching the exchange with expressions I couldn't quite read. A few of them looked at their commander, then at me, then back at their commander, waiting to see what she would do or say next. She could have said nothing. She could have thanked me quickly and walked away, chalking the whole thing up to luck. That's what I expected, honestly. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I hadn't done any of this to prove a point. I'd done it because a section was about to fail and I knew how to stop it. Instead, she reached down, picked up my dropped tool bag, and held it out to me. "I said something to you this morning," she said. Her voice was quieter now, stripped of the performance it usually carried. I was wrong. I took the bag from her. You don't have to say that. I know I don't have to, she said. I'm saying it because it's true. I didn't have a clever response for that, so I just nodded and started repacking my tools, checking the valve one more time to make sure it would hold until a proper repair crew could replace the strut. Around us, the engineers were slowly returning to their stations, running diagnostics now that there was actually something functional to diagnose. Commander Thren stayed near me for a moment longer, watching me work. Will you show my team how that valve functions? In case this happens again. Sure, I said. It's not complicated. Anyone can learn it. Perhaps, she said, but you were the only one who did. I finished checking the seal, stood up, and slung my tool bag over my shoulder. There wasn't anything else to say, not really. I wasn't going to stand there and make her feel small the way she had tried to make me feel small that morning. That wasn't the kind of person I wanted to be, and honestly, it wasn't the kind of moment that called for it. A section had almost failed, people had almost gotten hurt. Now it hadn't, and that was enough. I should get back to my rounds, I said. Coolant leak on deck 4 isn't going to patch itself. She almost smiled at that. A small, tired, genuine thing. Of course, thank you, technician. I walked out of Sector 9 the same way I'd walked in, tool bag on my back, nothing dramatic about it. Behind me, I heard her say something to her engineers, quieter this time, without the edge that had colored her voice that morning. I didn't need to hear the words to know what had changed. Some lessons don't need an audience to matter. Sometimes the truth just settles into a room on its own, and everyone left inside walks out a little different than they walked in.